Harris administration. A Harris administration and a Democratic one-party rule system. If Democrats can give the 11 to 21 million illegal aliens citizenships, they will be able to win every election. This is their end game. Hello and welcome to my channel. Let us compare Canada's erosion of rights and liberties compared to the U.S. While Canada is considered a democracy, it operates within a parliamentary system that offers fewer protections for individual liberties compared to the United States. This has allowed the Canadian government to curtail freedoms under the guise of public safety, social policy, or environmental initiatives. Below is a detailed comparison of the Canadian political system with that of the United States, followed by an argument highlighting how Canadians have lost significant rights and liberties. Canada's system of government versus the United States. Parliamentary democracy, Canada, versus constitutional republic, U.S. Canada's parliamentary system vests significant power in the executive branch led by the Prime Minister. Citizens vote for members of Parliament, MPs, but the leader of the ruling party becomes the Prime Minister, centralizing much decision-making within the government. In contrast, the United States is a constitutional republic where power is divided between federal and state governments. Citizens directly elect a president and members of Congress, providing multiple layers of checks and balances, especially with the judicial branch safeguarding individual rights through the Bill of Rights. Charter of Rights and Freedoms versus U.S. Bill of Rights. Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, part of the 1982 Constitution, lists several individual freedoms but includes reasonable limits clauses, Section 1. This allows the government to curtail freedoms in cases where it believes such actions are justified. The U.S. Bill of Rights enshrines certain freedoms, such as free speech, the right to bear arms, and protection from unreasonable searches, without any equivalent reasonable limits loophole, giving Americans stronger protections against government overreach. Key liberties lost in Canada: freedom of speech and censorship. The Canadian government has implemented various hate speech laws, such as Section 319 of the Criminal Code, that criminalize speech deemed offensive, even if non-violent. Additionally, Bill C-11, which regulates online content under the guise of protecting Canadian culture, allows the government to censor digital platforms and content creators. In the U.S., the First Amendment offers broad protections for speech, even if it is controversial or unpopular, protecting citizens from government censorship. Gun rights. Canada has drastically curtailed gun ownership. In 2020, the government banned over 1,500 models of firearms through executive orders, including weapons previously legal for hunting and self-defense. The right to own firearms is treated as a privilege in Canada, subject to strict regulation. In contrast, the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution guarantees the right to bear arms, ensuring citizens can defend themselves from both criminals and potential government tyranny. COVID-19. Mandates and restrictions. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Canada implemented harsh lockdowns, travel bans, and vaccine mandates. Unvaccinated individuals were banned from traveling domestically, and many workers were fired for refusing the vaccine, including healthcare workers. Protesters opposing these mandates, such as those in the Freedom Convoy, were met with government crackdowns, including freezing the bank accounts of participants. The U.S. also implemented restrictions, but individual states had the freedom to set their own rules. In many states, mandates were relaxed quickly, and resistance to mandates was protected under state laws, showcasing the benefit of federalism. Property rights and government overreach. Canada's environmental policies have led to the seizure of farmlands and the imposition of heavy restrictions on resource development. The Trudeau government's green initiatives have overridden the interests of private property owners, especially in rural areas. In the U.S., property rights are better protected, with state laws and the judiciary limiting federal overreach. The Fifth Amendment also offers protection against unlawful government seizure of private property through eminent domain. Religious freedom. Canadian policies have increasingly restricted religious expression in the public sphere. For example, Bill 21 in Quebec prohibits government employees from wearing religious symbols, such as crosses or hijabs, in the workplace. Churches were also shut down during COVID-19, with some pastors arrested for holding services. The First Amendment in the U.S. ensures greater protections for religious freedoms, preventing the government from prohibiting religious practice or forcing people to abandon their beliefs in public settings. Freedom of assembly. Canada's response to protests has revealed a troubling tendency toward authoritarianism. The government used the Emergencies Act to break up the peaceful Freedom Convoy protest, freezing protesters' assets and labeling them as extremists. In the U.S., peaceful protest is protected under the First Amendment, and the government faces significant legal challenges if it overreaches or attempts to restrict lawful assemblies. Conclusion: a democracy with increasing authoritarian tendencies. While Canada is technically a democracy, its system allows the government to exercise unchecked power over citizens in ways that undermine their freedoms. Through expansive censorship laws, restrictive gun policies, and overreach during COVID-19, Canadians have lost many of the rights they once enjoyed. In contrast, the U.S. Constitution provides stronger individual protections through explicit guarantees in the Bill of Rights, preventing many of the same overreaches seen in Canada. Ultimately, the centralization of power within Canada's parliamentary system, coupled with the Charter's reasonable limits clauses, enables the erosion of individual liberties. The American system, with its emphasis on federalism, constitutional checks, and unalienable rights, offers better safeguards against government overreach, ensuring citizens retain a greater degree of freedom.